Hey everybody, welcome to another M8 meetup. This is our third. How exciting. Seems like the weeks kind of just fly by.
Yeah, it really does feel like we just did this like the other day.
Maybe every week is a little too often, I don't know. So we're just
Uh,
kind of winging it as far as structure and figuring out how these go along. So if it ends up being too frequent, we could always slow it down a little bit.
I mean, I like the pace. I like having something to look forward to. It's like but I get that.
It's
Kind
Saturday
of
fun day.
yeah, get through the week and then hang out and socialize, which is something I literally don't do anymore. So kind of in many ways for the best.
Yeah, this is nice for our mental health.
Yeah, starting to get used to talking to people online now. Let's see. So I wrote down this week we'll focus on making a quick song in M8 as well as synth sampling, resampling, deep dive. So I imagine we'll touch up as far as synths. It would be nice to go over the FM synth a little bit more. Maybe we'll show more of that. Um, as far as sampling, I don't think we ever covered any of that stuff. And I hope I can get myself set up for that because I'm currently not. And resampling, which is super interesting and fun and super easy to do. So if Mikey wants to start us off with
Let's do this.
some
Hello,
song
everybody.
structure.
Yeah. Um, the screen sharing should be popped up now. Hope everyone's had a wonderful week. So I'm gonna just briefly go over kind of starting a new song structure. I know we've gotten a lot of inquiries from people who maybe are just getting headless now. It seems like there was a lot of momentum that happened over the last week of a lot of new faces, a lot of new questions, and a good number of people who don't have experience with trackers in particular or um, LSDJ or any experience with maybe even music software stuff outside of the traditional DAW. So I've been getting a lot of questions, and a lot of the questions have been resolved just from some additional supplemental streams that I've done in the last between the Saturdays about just where should I start with should I start with percussion? Should I start with melody? And we briefly talked about this in the pre-chat, but I mean it comes down to what you want to do. Um, it's the same thing as like, you know, I want to I want to make a picture. Should I start with sketching or should I pick out the color palette first? It comes down to how you think of structuring things creatively, and that in itself is a whole different topic. So I won't go too far into that. Instead, I'll just show you some basic structure and organization that I do, um, and just to get an idea of like when you're building a full song, how you can set things up so it'll play the full track the way you expect, and also ways that when I'm working on stuff, I'll show you a couple works in progress that I'm doing, kind of like how I place things. Um, Something that I should really hope that I can help you is figure out, how you can set these things up so when you're piecing songs together, you're not getting stuck, I guess. Um, I should also mention that the way I structure songs is it's what I do. It's not the be all end all. It's by no means efficient. Um, I'm sure, that, if you've talked to anyone who's used LSDJ before, there's always debates about, you know, uh, what chains you should use for empty chains or kill chains and that sort of stuff. I'm not gonna talk about that's again a fun internal discussion we all have. So I guess I can get started here. So I already have a song loaded up that I was just using for sound check, but this is a good place to start. Um, you know, one of the questions I got a lot was like, uh, how should I organize my chains? Should I just start with 0 and just work my way up? And the answer is yes, but I have my own means of the way I structure things. And this is just a lot of these are old habits from LSDJ, and they've just kind of stuck with me as I've moved over into the M8. But the very first and obvious thing you can see is that I have started a chain and 1 through 5, and I use the tens place, so I guess it's technically the 16ths, so that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Obviously, these two got swapped around at some point. It happens, and that's how it goes.
Metro Atlanta area and Cobb County, we know 2 educators who've recently passed from COVID-19. So there have been some difficult conversations about how to safely have kids in class. And that new study we mentioned about
I think your microphone is on.
Safer
What's going on?
Out of school is an interesting addition to that conversation.
Mute you.
But certainly, yes, Natasha Chen, thank you. And for more on this promising study that Natasha was just talking about, one of its co-authors, Dr. Daria Long, joins me. She's a clinical assistant professor at the University of Tennessee. Dr. Long, thank you for coming on. Before we dive into the findings of this study, first.
There you go. I disconnected them. All right, I'm so sorry. Well,
they're gonna join again.
Yeah.
Start the same problem all over again.
All right. Sorry about that. Someone left their microphone on, and I guess they got bored of me talking real quickly. So, all right. So as you can see, I have it organized here, 1 through 5. Again, that's how I just organize things in my brain. So when I'm starting to, make new chains, I kind of have an idea of what these things are gonna be. I also tend to split my my instruments down the middle. So generally, my percussion tends to be on the right side, and my melodic stuff tends to be on the left. That's also just an old habit from LSDJ, mostly because the furthest right channel, channel 4 on LSDJ, was the noise channel, which was used not exclusively, but more often than not, specifically for percussive instruments, and the same going for the wave channel, which is channel 3. I used it usually for like kick drums and for percussive samples, since it had a very rudimentary sample playback instrument that you could use. That being said, this one is actually a little kind of little tribute to LSDJ, as I used a lot of channel economy to use multiple instruments in one channel. Here I have the kick, the snare that I stole from Tim, and just a little bass synth here. But yeah, generally, I tend to organize it this way. I think we briefly went over kill chains and empty chains last time, so I'll go over it again, just real fast. Generally, the way I like to have it set up is 0-0 is my all kill chain. So, no notes are going to pass through, but it will keep this chain in sync with the other chains that are happening as the song is playing. An example, I can just do one real quick here. Here you can see this is like a more fleshed out track. You can see there's lots of empty space where I'm not using anything. But in order to make sure that everything stays in sync, it's the same spacing as all the other chains. And that just helps the whole song structure put together. So
sounds so nice.
Oh, thank you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's I think I used that same lead for another track.
What's that lead?
It's just a seesaw. It's just yeah, it just
Macro?
Yeah, it's macro synth seesaw. Yeah. Just with and then I'm wasting the LFO by using the pitch just so that even though I have all these commands, it's just I don't have to think about the vibrato, so I just have it on just really slow modulation on the pitch. So
yeah, I do that sometimes for that kind of analog drift sound.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's kind of what I was going for with that. Totally. So here's a work in progress. This is very rough. I think I spent maybe just a couple hours on a song here. And generally, you can see what stuff I started with first, based off of the lower numbers. So you can see that sometimes things get shifted around. You know, this actually uses my wavsynth that's been sampled. Simple kick drum. As you can see, I have most of my percussive stuff over here. I have all my hi-hats and stuff, which is nice. So when I'm playing a track, I know that all my percussive stuff is over here. So if I'm working on a track and I want to mute something that I don't need, I can cut these out. I guess I can speed it up. Handy. It's very handy just for me when I'm structuring my songs to know melodic stuff's over here, percussion stuff's over here. Because it's with 8 tracks, you have so many. It's so easy to get lost, especially if you're still learning the user interface and you're moving through left and right and you fat finger and you're like, okay, I pushed, where the heck am I? It's good to know that you can back out and be like, okay, all my percussive stuff is over here, all my melodic stuff is over here, instead of like, from project to project, you just jumble it around. It's really helps to kind of organize it in that way. So that's how I have it mostly set up. And then I do use a good combination of song mode and live mode, which we've also gone over live mode a little bit. When you're in the M8 and you hold select and you press the left directional button on the song screen, it lets you alternate between song mode and live mode. Song mode instantly launches all clips in a row right away, and then pressing start obviously stops it. But what's cool is you can actually alternate between them in real time. So I have this. I launched, this row, and the way it works is if there's an empty row, it's going to go find the next closest or most immediate chain in that track. But you can alternate over to live mode, and I can change things around real quickly. So when I'm working on songs, I can add things, remove things, and it just lets me play with it in a more live, for better words, a live mindset, more of like a traditional step sequencer where you have all your different patterns for all your different instruments and you can shuffle them around without having to be, I have to wait for this specific part of the song to roll back over. I can just get, jump down to this specific, this specific chain of percussion stuff, So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Did anyone have any questions regarding any of the organization stuff?
I could say that you're way more cleaner than I am.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I try my best because I'm sure there's probably some works that I have that are just chaos. Like this is my big project one, and it's just okay. This one's pretty organized as well. I don't know. Yeah, something like this. It's just mess. But as you can see, I kind of, for the most part, still keep like the 10s through 40s on one side and the 5s through whatever. And then depending on how I end up using that track, I might shuffle them around. It also helps with like when I have a performance, for example, I'll go back to like this track here. Helps with the nice new feature that M8 has, which is the global mutes and solos, which is when you press option and you press left or right, it will mute or solo the instruments based on the direction you're pointed. So if I'm on track 5 and I hold option, press left, it's going to solo everything from track 5 and to the left. But if I hold right, it's going to solo everything from track 5 to the right of it. So it's really handy. So then, if you're playing a performance and you want to cut all the percussion, but you want all the melodic stuff to be playing, real easy. And I imagine for most people, that's what they're going to want to do. They're going to be able to quickly mute the rhythmic or the percussion stuff really quickly without having to do the old-fashioned where you mute lock, which mute and solo locks are done by holding Option, pressing Select, and then letting go of Option first. And then once I let go of the keys, you can see that their 6 and 7 are locked into a mute. And then you can press Option, Select, and Start to reset. Yeah. So those are good reasons to organize yourself in that kind of fashion. And I hope that helps someone kind of get an idea of like at least structure-wise, where they should be placing things. A little bit of organization goes a long way because you're looking at hex numbers for hours and hours, and your brain starts to melt after a while. So having some sense of cleanliness will really help. I'm gonna check the chat for any questions. Let me see if there's anyone has anything. Looks like no questions so far. Another thing, and this comes down to preference, is how many phrases should I use in a chain? I know that usually if someone's starting a new track, they're probably going to start. I'll say I start with percussion here, and I'll just use a quick sample here. I'll just load something. I'll just do like this. Sorry, I know I'm going really fast. I'm just setting up something, so you have a reference here. You set up your drums, and it's really easy to just have your one loop going, even if you don't add any variety. I recommend kind of figuring out how many phrases you're planning to use in a chain from the beginning. Generally, I tend to use 8. I kind of think of this as like as your melodic, your bar. I guess it's technically 2 bars. It just depends on music theory stuff that I don't know anything about. So, but I tend to use at least this many. It's just based on mostly on how I write my melodies. Yeah, my melodies and my rhythms, and how often I want things to change up. But when I'm doing the bare bones, getting started, I make sure that I have this many in any chain that I'm making. That way, when I'm making songs and I'm moving from pattern to pattern, things don't get mixed up really fast. Because you can use varied chains to make cool polyrhythm, polymeter stuff. 0 through 7, thank you. Yeah, I actually use 0 through 7. I just did that on accident. I was moving too fast. But that just keeps me from, if I have some percussion here and I have, a melodic idea here, for example, and I'll just make something real quick. We'll just do like a little simple little synth here. Just, I have my little happy melody, right? And say do this and do this.
I bet that's gonna sound great.
It's gonna sound really good. Yeah. Yeah. So, but if you're doing this and you're doing this, where you have 3 chains on this voice, and then 8 chains or 8 phrases or 8 patterns here, they're not gonna line up, and suddenly your rhythms and your melodies are out of sync, and that's maybe something that you want. But I would bet that the majority of users are expecting that all their rhythms and their melodies are going to stay rhythmically synced, and most likely in a 4/4 fashion. So for me, when I think about when I'm writing melodies and writing bass lines, I want it to be 8 phrases, 8 patterns before I want it to move on. You can absolutely use more, you can use less. For me, this is a good starting point. I think for a long time I used to just use 4, but I found that is like the nice balance of how long do I want these things to move, and how fast do I want my screen to move when I'm looking, maybe if I'm performing, how fast do I expect these chains to shift from row to row when I'm queuing or preparing things. So,
Sorry,
again,
that's me.
Hey, no worries. Is there a template feature in M8? No, but you can always make a template.
There is kind of. Oops.
Oh,
I
go for
rested
it.
my hand on my keyboard. If you, it's kind of a hidden feature at the moment, but if you save a song called template in the system folder, then when you create a new song, it'll use that instead of the defaults.
Wowee.
Yeah.
Now we know.
Yeah, it's definitely a hidden feature.
That's awesome. I don't know if I would personally use templates, but I can see a template being really good application for people who are, make a lot of little ideas real fast and they don't want to have to set everything up every time. So
yeah, it's
that's really handy.
It's especially convenient if you have like external gear and you have kind of the same,
Absolutely.
amount of sources that you want to keep using.
I was just going to say that would be perfect for, I have like live hardware set up and I configure it the same way every time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And those are things that you can also, in like the MIDI settings and that kind of stuff, you can save defaults for that as well.
Using instruments.
Yeah.
Or you could also just use instrument,
Oh yeah.
save your default MIDI instruments.
Which I think I have quite a few at the moment. And it's nice because I actually really love the way the MIDI instrument stuff works, because then I can at some point I'm going to have, like, for example, I have a folder specifically for my Hydrosynth, and I can just load up patches and then it just pushes the program change as soon as it hits the instrument on the pattern, and it's really, really cool. Really, really good way for pulling up patches real quick. I highly recommend, if you use a lot of hardware stuff and you have different patches, to make little folders for all your different stuff. So, yeah. Did anyone else have any questions here? Oh, if things do go out of sync, is there an FX command or button combo to force the shrinks back to step 1, like a reset? You can press select and start. Kind of works as a reset.
You might be able to do the left start thing would also reset everything. Holding left and hitting start would restart that row.
Like a fast one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one way to, I end up just using select and start, and it just resets. So it comes down to how you want to do it. Yeah. Very super, super handy.
Have you guys gone over time signatures in the previous meetups already? I kind of briefly touched on a little bit using Groove, I guess, but maybe didn't really show it. I think I just talked about it.
Yeah, I think we went over. It's the most rudimentary form of doing time signature. You could use the Groove, which is really, really handy. You could also, use a hop command, which is how I did this track, which is in 6/4, and it's basically one full phrase here, and then a half of a phrase here, and then hop tells it to go ahead and move on to the next phrase, and you just do that repeatedly, and you get yourself into a whatever time signature you're wanting to do. If it's in 3/4, the Groove is really handy because you can just tell it to skip the last few steps every time, and then you just pushes it right into 3/4. Oh no, there's no command to do it. There's no reset command. But
yeah, you have to do it manually. I guess the question was, what they were asking is if there's a way to do it via a command to do the reset. Not currently, no. We have talked about it briefly, but it's on the list of possible things down the road. Sounds complicated though. I don't want to do it.
See, were there any questions in the Twitch chat? Looks like it's just some supplementary discussion, which is always nice. Yeah. Did anyone have any questions regarding any of the song structure stuff? And let's see. I see some people typing, so I'll wait. Several people are typing. Yeah. Yeah. Here, I'll play some music while I wait for a few questions here.
Do you have Girl from Ipanema?
Unfortunately, I do not, but it's a wonderful song. I do love me some bossa. Actually, I have a bossa track, but it's not on this MA. It's on my headless, and I think one of the samples is missing. So, actually, I wonder if it'll work on this one. Here, give me a second. Let me swap out cards here.
Queuing hold music.
Yeah. I love that the SD cards are just hot swappable. I go straight from my headless right into my actual MA, and it works just fine.
Doesn't on headless.
Oh. There you go.
Yeah.
Let's see.
That's some pretty good hold music.
Yeah.
Should keep it up for any time somebody has a question.
I think that's a wonderful idea. Thank you. Yeah, this is I occasionally do commissions for VTubers who have background music, and this is somebody's background music that they commissioned. Although one of the instruments is not working. It's a rotary organ, and I don't know what I did with the sample. So I have to figure out what I did with it. But
did you not bundle your song when you were finished?
I did not bundle my song like a fool. But I wonder if I could put something else in the meantime. Wait. Anyway.
I love this so much.
Any advice on doing background music? How do you make it work with voice? I mean, that comes to you working with the person that you're, who's commissioned you. I mean, at least for this, I used a lot of references. They sent me Animal Crossing tracks. They sent me really traditional bossa nova, and I just pulled apart, the kind of instruments they were using, the kind of tone they were going for, mixing on the M8. Well, I'll tell you what. When you look at my mixer for some of the tracks that I think are pretty decently mixed. This is my M8. That's why all my songs are missing. I panicked for 2 seconds.
You switched SD cards.
I switched SD cards, and I was just like, "Oh shit! Where'd everything go?"
Oh yeah, there's a bug that deletes everything you've done.
Yeah, it's called dropping it in the toilet.
Oh.
Mixing. I mean, when I work on stuff, I mean, I keep most of my stuff pretty. Oh, sorry, I didn't refresh my screen here. When I'm mixing, I really don't do a whole lot. Some of this is just fine tuning. Like these values here are probably going to go back to E at some point. That does bring up a very important question regarding gain staging, which I think Tim was one of Tim's major concerns. Was there are so many ways to modulate the incoming and outgoing volume of the instrument that you can get really lost in the gain staging. But I think
it's true
that it does give you a lot of fine tuning. You can really fine tune the how your instruments are going to sit in the mix. I highly recommend using the limiter gain. Maybe not cranked up to A0 for everything. That's pretty hard. And I was going for a specific like everything has kind of a pumping effect. But for something like traditional, something somewhere between like 3 to 5, 30 to 50 is a good starting place for the limiter on the M8, and it does a really good job of gluing things together, including external instruments. I almost never have the limiter turned off. It makes a big difference to me as when it comes in regards to mixing and having your stuff sound glued, is to work with the limiter on instead of turning it on at the end, because then you're getting an idea of how everything is going to smush and glue while you're building the track, as opposed to adding that limiter at the very end, slapping it on the end. It adds a coloration to your entire track that you not had, subconsciously working with from the beginning. It's like when you take a really nice photo or a really nice painting in Photoshop and you load it on Instagram and you slap a filter on it. Sure, maybe the filter, if you go in knowing that you're going to be putting that filter on from the beginning, then you're able to add the details that help that filter make everything pop, as opposed to just throwing on, sepia on top of your really nice photo of your backyard with your dog. You know what I mean? Same kind of concept. So I recommend definitely, especially with like a really dense track or something with a lot of percussion, really play with the limiter, crank it way up to see how it plays with everything, how it makes the transients of your snare kind of pop, and then just I would start extreme and then pull back. For me, that makes a big difference, because then you can start to really hear the extremes, kind of the things you don't want to hear kind of get pulled away, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to increase the limiter until I get a tone that I want. I find working top down works better in that regards. So start with your limiter. Even you don't have to start right away. Work with your basic song, get your basic structure, then crank the limiter and then pull it back. And then while you're working on your track, play with the V column, maybe, mess with the dry and the wet for your instrument and your sends, and just go back and forth. You'll eventually start to figure out how things sit naturally, and it becomes easier with every new song. And eventually you're like, okay, I know how I can make this song pump. I can set these kind of settings, and then I can turn the limiter up, and it's just a lot of playful back and forth.
My feeling on it is, as far as mixing goes, is to try to do, or at least what I try to do, is to do, when I'm working on my song, I try not to touch the mixer screen, because as soon as I start changing those values on the mixer screen, then I can't do any track, have multiple things going on in the same track. I can't mix things around anymore, because now certain volumes are strictly set to specific tracks, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
So I try to do most of my volumes in the instrument screen for the most part.
I would say, in regards to the mixer, I would say that for the most part, this to be your very final staging of any final volume adjustments that you want to do, where you know that these instruments, all the instruments that are used in that track, won't, you're not going to destroy, a lead because it's going to suddenly be too quiet, and then you have to go back and redo it all again, or remix it from the ground up. So I would say this is the finest of the fine tune at the very end.
Yeah, I normally end up, like, once I have like a completed idea using most of the tracks, I might start tweaking those values, especially when I drive up the limiter.
Yeah. So like in this song, for example, I have 3 different instruments, and if I turn this down, they all go bye-bye. So suddenly this mix, you know, you can see how detrimental that can be. So that would be for, all these things are working together. So maybe I want the lead to pop a little bit more, so I can dial these back just a smidge. And you can even see the peak decibel down at the bottom when you're holding it while it's playing. Really, 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 really handy. Let's see. You had a song screen question earlier regarding guidance about uses for isolated chains and loops as opposed to filling everything. I mean, that's a totally valid use of the M8 tracker. And in fact, there was for a very, very long time with LSDJ, there used to be a lot of fight. I don't know if I could call it infighting necessarily, but
debates
of debates of how legitimate your performance was, whether or not you use song mode or live mode. And it's such a kind of conversation. That's the only way I can describe
LSDJ
this.
versus Nanoloop. Go.
Yeah, it's basically like if you're not using LSDJ the same way you use Nanoloop, you are cheating. You're just pushing start. You might as well have an iPod kind of thing.
I think that depends on how you define a live performance, right?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
For some people, it's more about the presentation and what they're doing on the stage versus the material
100%.
itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that gets into philosophical performance things, and that's a whole can of worms that I'm not prepared to reignite. I would rather it die, honestly.
So for next week.
Yeah, so next week, live versus song. Pick your side and get your gloves on. All right. So the guidance in regards to isolated chains and chain loops. Song mode, or excuse me, live mode is going to be your friend in that case. And again, that's just by pressing select and left. It shifts it between the two. It's nice because it works very similarly to Ableton's clip launcher, where you can just kind of pick and choose what you want to play. Everything gets queued based on your quantize for live. 0, 0 is chain length. So the way it works is whichever chain has the shortest amount of phrases.
Whichever one repeats first, basically.
Whichever one repeats first is going to cause the reset. So that may not be what you want, but that does trip me up sometimes. For example, when I'm working on tracks like this, and then I have, something here, and that's actually something there. I have like this one here, and I'm working on song stuff, and suddenly, I move to this one, and it's so fast. But
everything starts getting out of sync.
Everything gets out of sync really, really fast, and you're just like, whoa, what happened? It happens all the time. But live mode's going to be your friend. Chain length is what I use, but for doing live and using isolated chains and loops, you may want to consider live quantize steps, so that way you always know that no matter what's playing, even if they're not in sync and if they're not using the same amount of phrase lengths, they'll always trigger on 4 steps, for example, or however many steps you want it to be. You can always have a guaranteed count in if you launch it. So you may want to consider trying out the live quantize and seeing which one feels the most natural for moving between clip to clip. Another thing to consider is in live mode, when you hold select and you press option to start your highlight, you can select a highlighted amount of different chains to launch at the same time, as opposed to all of them. So that way, if you're in live mode like this, and you have all these ones here that you want to launch, instead of going tap, 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 you can just select them all like that. Did that help you in regards to isolated chains and chain loops?
I think another thing you could do, like what I like to do when I'm working on a song, is say I'm working on a specific row and I don't want to like mess anything up above it or below it. I'll select that entire row, copy it, and then paste it far away from everything else. You know what I mean? Just like you're doing here. Yeah, just like you had here. So that way you're isolating the little loop that you're currently working on without affecting the whole song.
Yeah. That's definitely handy. So, it's like, oh, I specifically want this section of the song. I want to work on this, but I like the song structure here. Yeah, I will highlight, press Option to copy it to the buffer, then come down here, select, edit, paste it.
Look at all the hidden gems you have.
Yeah. And then you can just specifically work on this section here. Yeah.
And of course you could use bookmark. You could bookmark the original part, so you know where it was pasted from, that kind of thing, or copied from.
Perfect. A perfect use case for bookmarks, in fact. Yeah, and you can see this song. I've spent quite a few hours on this one, and I have lots and lots of little ideas that that didn't sound great. And
Gems.
that's why this gem is right here, because it doesn't sound correct. I was trying to see if I had another example. Oh yeah, bookmarks here. You can see I have a lot of bookmarks. So to enable a bookmark, you just press Option 3 times. 1, 2, 3. You get the bookmark created pop up there. And if I move away, you can now see the bookmark is there. All it does is it changes the color of the chain. Nothing else is affected. And there's a lot of different uses that you can use for bookmarks. I use it mainly for two purposes. The first is for live performances where I'm using hardware. It lets me allow me to like look ahead and know, okay, this instrument's coming in, and I know in this song, my 303, I have the cutoff starting at 0. So it lets me look ahead and see, I need to make sure that my stuff is prepared. Or maybe it's time for me to start cueing, an external effects pad on my DJ mixer, for example. I'm going to do a cool fill with like the beat repeat that I can't accomplish any other way. It lets me know it's time to get that started. Other case uses, usually with a lot of songs, I don't add a lot of variety until I have the main structure of the song kind of worked out. So a lot of the times this like 5-0 here is all the way down, and then I'll highlight this and say, okay, I want to add, a fill here. I want to change things up here. And this just lets me know once I've finished the structure, I can come back to it. And I remember that these are things that I wanted to fix that maybe I forgot about. And it comes super in handy because there are times where you're just listening to a song that you're working on and you're like, oh, that would be really cool, but I don't want to stop just yet. I want to listen to the rest of the song. Bookmarks, perfect use for that. Yeah, so I think for this one here, this let me know that I was going to render the whole track. So I actually do that right here. So I have this track here. And I was like, okay, I know that I want to repeat this, and then I wanted to do some like DJ cut up of the whole track. So I remembered to bookmark this whole part and then bounce it to a track, this simple one here. And
yeah, you can't even tell it flipped to a single sample.
You can't. It's so good. And then you can just do stuff like, yeah. So it rules. I think we're gonna get into rendering. I think at some point today.
I think it's listed on the talking points.
Okay.
I mean, you could show that if you want, but if you want to break, we could dive into something else too.
Yeah. I want to take a breather, drink some water, and then I'd be happy to go over it. If anyone has any other questions that we can answer in the meantime, I'm just going to rest my voice and drink some beer. So I'll play this while we check the chat for questions and stuff. So I'll just let this play in the meantime. I'm back. Oh, the song's almost over. Perfect timing.
I believe there was a question in the Twitch chat.
Okay.
I asked, how do you make a track this good? Could you please do a step-by-step tutorial?
Yeah, all right. Let's. All right.
No.
First,
It's okay.
no.
This will take about 10 hours.
Yeah, I saw a comment regarding least chiptune thing you've heard on the M8 so far. Thank you. I definitely kind of avoid it. Not for any particular reason, besides that I made Game Boy tracker music for like 15 years, and despite what anyone says, sometimes eating your favorite dish every day for 15 years makes you not want to eat it. So I think it's important to emphasize that the M8 tracker, while it can do a chiptune stuff, and it can do chiptune stuff really, really well, is by no means a chiptune tracker. It clearly grabs its influence and its UI from the UI of LSDJ, but it's so much more than that. It has 5 different synth engines, and I would say that most of them are not very chiptune sounding unless you want it to be.
Once you kind of force them into it.
Yeah. In order, I made a chiptune thing this week, and it required me to use my actual Game Boy's reference. So it takes a bit more work, and it's something you can do. But man, just it's flexible, and you can really make some really, really pretty sounding not chiptune stuff. And I hope that we see some more of it. I can go back over instrument arrangement. Absolutely. But I just want to do like, there's some people who are in the chat right now who are making some really cool not chiptune, really innovative sound stuff. Uh, 10K Tom, who I think actually is no longer in the chat. So, oh no, he's in 10K Tom is in Twitch chat right now, making really, really cool, weird footwork stuff. Um, it I would definitely check out the hashtag M8 tracker on Twitter to see what everyone is doing, because it's not all just chiptune. I mean, a lot of the people are chiptune or ex chiptune people that have the device, um, just to see the variety of things that are coming up. Oh, there you are. Yeah, uh, check it out. It's worth seeing how powerful it can be. I think it's easy to get the impression that you're just making extra big Game Boy music based on the form factor of the device, its portability, how tiny it's. When you see it, you kind of expect it to be like a Game Boy Color tracker. You know what I mean, or Game Boy Advance. Like, but it's way, way, way so much more. And where was I going with this? Anyway, yeah, it's really good. And I think one thing that I really want to do is definitely showcase how powerful and how cool and nicely produced things you can make with it. You know, we're all doing our part trying to make impressionable music to whatever degree. So I just I do appreciate it when people are shocked or surprised when they're hearing something that's not chiptune. So for me, that's kind of a feel good thing.
So, do we want to move on to another shiny topic?
I can move on. Disposable Planet just wanted me to go through horizontal arrangement. I did it early on in the chat, but for the most part, I kind of organize it in the same way I do with LSDJ, where I split. I tend to split my percussion to the right and my melodic stuff to the left. Uh, Generally, it's like I do like kick drum, snare stuff here. Also snare stuff here. Just depends on the track. If I'm doing 4 on the floor stuff, I tend to have to dedicate a new channel for the snare. Although you could just render the snare and the kick together and just make it a new instrument, and then that resolves that issue. I don't know if then you get into the problem of having to, if you have adjust the mix and all that stuff, and that's a whole different topic. Um, and then yeah, hi-hats, and then I usually use this one for like if I do risers or cooldowns or crashes and that kind of stuff. That tends to be where this stuff sits. And then if I do vocal stems, I usually do vocal stems on the first track. Um, Vocal stems or pads, because again, this is the same way I organize stuff in LSDJ. So a lot of it is just me sticking to old habits that are probably not efficient, but I like to think that because I made pretty efficient tracks in LSDJ, that it translates pretty decently. So, so I do pads, and I do my melodic stuff. I think the reason I did melodic stuff on 2 is because it wasn't affected by sweep, and I used to use sweep for kicks in LSDJ Pulse Channel 1.
Yeah.
And you couldn't use the sweep command in 2. So I was like, okay, this will always be the melodic lead, and this will be like supplementary kick stuff because it's got the sweep command. I don't know if that's
in LSDJ, just for people that don't know, the first 2 channels are dedicated for the pulse synthesis channels in the hardware, and the 3rd channel is for waveforms and samples, and the 4th channel is noise. So you kind of end up being forced into the, first channels are probably going to be more melodic than the noise channel. So you kind of have that left and right mentality there.
Yeah, and that's absolutely where all this organization comes from. I mean, you could do it backwards if you really wanted to. If you're somebody who's rhythmically oriented, you're probably going to start with your percussion and move over to the right. Or you could put anything wherever you want. That's the beauty of it. You know, I could change the arrangement for everything. I could have my melodic voice and my percussive voice in the same track if I want. And I mean, I've done that. And I actually showed an example earlier. And this actually kind of goes back to when we're talking about mixes. If you want to have stuff that sounds pretty clean, I would encourage you. This can be some homework. Work on track economy. Put different instruments into one track. Do like your bass line and your drums all in just track, track 1. And what you'll find is you'll come up with really cool, creative rhythmic patterns for all 3 instruments. You know, your kicks, your snares, and your bass line. You'll find really cool, syncopated, funky rhythms that you wouldn't really think of when you have all that space. And also, you'll find that your mix sounds really clean because your bass and your kick are not, interfering with each other. They're not fighting for headroom in the mix. Suddenly, it's just your kick ringing through or just your bass line, and you can get really cool effects that way. I know with LSDJ, and I still do it here. You can do almost pseudo side chain, not chide chain, side chain effect by having the kick and the bass in the same track. That's even a good place to start. Just put your kick drum and whatever bass line you're going to do, and don't just stick to 4/4. Try some weird kick rhythms and throw the bass synth in there and watch how they play with each other. And when you finish the track, you'll notice how nicely and cleanly everything sits in the mix. So that's something to definitely consider. I I think that was the last question regarding arrangement. So we can move on.
I like Chide saying it sounds like a vaporwave band or something.
Yeah. So yeah, we can move on. Did anyone want to take over, or what were we going to cover next?
We have more deep dives into instrument synthesis, as well as resampling and sampling. I could cover any of those things if you want a break.
Sure. Yeah, I need a little break. My voice is getting a little rough.
I'll just wing it. Let me look at my script. Actually, I wrote a script. Wait, no, I didn't. Hold on a second. Let's turn on my camera and flip. So many windows open. Siphon. There we go. Okay. So maybe we should cover, I guess, sampling. Let's see. I'm going to start a new song. Oh, maybe I shouldn't start a new song. Maybe I'll just move this over here. That sounds crazy. That's my mono machine coming through. You could see it here on the input. All right. So I'm going to sample this. This is an external instrument that's being controlled using a MIDI out instrument on channel 2. And so I'm going to try to sample this. Let's see. I'm going to create a new sample-based instrument. What channel are we on? 4. So I'm on a sample here. I'm going to go to the record screen. When there's no sample loaded, it'll say record over here. If there is a sample loaded, it'll say edit. So what you're presented with at the top here are your record controls. One of them will just start recording. So if I hit this and just start hitting the mono machine, it'll start sampling it. Oops. If I go to ARM mode, it'll wait until there's audio coming in to start recording. So right now it's armed, and as soon as I hit a key, There we go. And you can see it, you know, there's a little bit of silence in the beginning, but it's pretty good. The volume is right here for your input volume. The arm volume is at what volume to, and you can see a little meter here, what volume that it'll detect to start recording. And then there's a song row mode, which will play back the song. Hold on, let me exit. It'll play back the song, play back any MIDI instruments and any instruments that are not samples. It'll play that back so you can record. So let's go back to the sample instrument. Chord. So if I hit song row here, it'll just start playing back the song and record the sample. It's super loud. Hold on, let me turn down my volume. It's a little more reasonable. So you could see it was kind of clipping there in that recording, so I'm going to try it again. Still looks like it's clipping. Oh, maybe that's just the mono machine. Yeah, that's probably just the mono machine. Just clipping, looking like it's clipping, but that's just the synthesis type. You get the idea. Some of these artifacts are the virtual display. Like you see, there's a white line there. That's just the display kind of freaking out. It needs to be optimized a little bit more. On the real M8, there's none of these weird graphic glitches. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and name it and save it. Sure. So now I could normalize it so the volume's at full. I could crop it if I want to, or convert it to mono or 8-bit. Overwrite the original sample. You can see the old sound still there and playing. So that's just a quick way to get stuff into your M8. Let's see, do I have any questions? Did I move too quickly?
Pretty smooth. So what if you wanted to make a chord with your mono synth?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me see if I remember how to put the mono machine into chord mode, because the mono machine is 6 mono synthesizers, but you could put it into polyphonic mode. Poly. All right, seems to be working now. Turn down the volume. Do a little bit of house cleaning here. So I was probably clipping the input on the M8 is what we were saying, because I'm using the headphone out of the mono machine and I had the volume cranked to max. So that explains that. Okay. So if I wanted to do MIDI chords, that's what you were saying? There is a command called chord. It's just that easy. And you could also add another chord or just a single note. So this is all using the MIDI out instrument. I could do another add on top of that. And I could also put that in a table. Let's see, chord. There's that graphic glitch again.
Or are you not able to paste between the commands on a phrase and a table?
No, not currently.
For some reason I thought you could. Okay.
No, because on certain conditions you can't. There's not a compatible way to do it, but technically they're two different copy buffers. So maybe I should just merge them at some point. But yeah, right now you can't. It's funny, like I did something more as a feature and it turns out to be an anti-feature. Let me turn up the pitch here. So what's interesting here is this is really only this is very specific to the MIDI instrument and nothing else on M8. You could have chords and adds in all three of these effects columns. However, the effects columns in table and the effects columns in phrase are shared. So if I put a different chord here, it'll replace the chord that's in effects column 1 here. Which is a feature because it kind of allows you to do change just one note of that chord pretty easily.
That's really cool, and I'm glad you mentioned it because I do lots of like suspended chords and stuff. And that makes that really a lot easier. Damn.
So let's see. I'm gonna try to make this obvious. So you could hear the difference between those two notes. So yeah, add is one command. I think the text is here. Add note. Add a note relative to the bass note. 0 to 7F adds to the bass note. FF to 80 subtracts from the bass note. So if I say add FE, that's like going 2 steps down from the bass note. And if I go add 2, that would be adding 2 steps or 2 semitones from the bass note.
The chord command is only additive, right?
Yeah, the chord up. Yeah, because the chord command's basically identical to ARP, where it's your second and third interval, number of semitones. Yeah, it's just identical to ARP, except for instead of ARPing it.
If you want to make weird inversions, that's where add would come in handy.
Yeah. So does that answer that question on MIDI instruments? Yeah, so I know that question's been asked several times, like, can you do chords? You could do chords. It comes at somewhat of a price. It's not like you get 3 independent note columns. So it's kind of like pseudo polyphony, if that's a thing. You could also let's see, what did I set up? I set up nothing. You could also do like an add, there it is. So if you wanted to hold this note down and add a second note on top of it later on, you could use the add command.
I answered this question. I answered this question in the chat, but are the chord and add available on any other synth engines?
No.
No.
Yeah. Because MIDI demands no processing. And the other synthesis engines are pretty limited based on, running on the little M8 brain. So
I said the solution, if they wanted to have chords for a synth, would be to make multiple tracks and then render that as a chord and just resample it as needed.
Yeah, that's definitely one way to do it, and we can kind of do that now if we want to. I'm gonna lose this FM song. Let's just save this and start over. All right. So let's do a simple Because this will also demonstrate how to do bouncing in M8. Right. Let's do 5 and then 8. Yeah, that sounds perfect. Hold on. So if I wanted to render that out, I could just, let me just, beautiful name, render it.
Oh yeah, quick note. Yeah, the macrosynth does have a chord instrument, so you could use that as chords. The limitation is that it has preset intervals and wavetables, so it's good for really fast, easy chords. I think we have in one of the pens in the Discord the values to chord equivalency, I guess. Yeah, I think we have some documentation on that.
Let me just, there. Well, the volume's a little quiet, I guess, but. So what I did is I just did a chord here on the first row and then rendered it. Make sure it's only one phrase long here by just having the first row selected. And then I just rendered it, saved it, and then loaded that in as a sample. There is a little volume matching that you need to do. It's pretty close.
I believe 7F is going to be the original volume that was recorded. At least from my experience, it seems like 7F is the way to go.
Seems like 7F with a little bit of dry in there too. At least for this example. I don't know why, but I just kind of do it by ear anyway, so it doesn't bother me too much, but wonder.
A little tweaking.
I mean, you could use the peak dB meter to do your matching. So if I play this back, it's like negative 5.9. So around there, plus 7. Yeah. Yeah, you get the idea. It's beautiful. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense for resampling. Do we have any other questions in regards to that, or? I'm not watching Twitch. Hold on.
Question, how do you make a track this good?
Carefully. I mean, again, like if I'm gonna do chords, normally nowadays I just do it with an FM synth, which I showed a while ago. You know, this old trick. But of course, you're limited to basically some form of sine wave or saw wave.
I actually have a question, and it's slightly off topic regarding these chords. Is there a particular reason why chords are easy to process here and not on other engines? Is it just because it's paraphonic, basically?
What do you mean? Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because I added this specific pitch modulator to the FM synth.
In my brain, is it just because I'm imagining A, B, C, D as 4 individual oscillators as opposed to a single unit? I'm just curious, like why chords are easy here and you couldn't do something similar on like a different engine.
You mean like the macro synth?
Yeah.
The macro synth only has a couple paraphonic synth types.
Right.
And those paraphonic values are, it's kind of like you're fading in between different presets of chords.
Right. Okay. I was just curious.
Because that macro synth engine is, for all intents and purposes, what's in braids, where it's controlled with a single knob.
Right.
And the FM synth has a mod destination or a source from, or destination to the semitones. So.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I don't know if that makes too much sense. Like, you could say, like, why don't you do the same thing in the macro synth? And I guess I could, but you would only have 2 parameters total to select those chords, and then you wouldn't have any control over the sound itself. So that kind of sounds limiting. Or I could make a new engine inside of the macro synth. I can make a new kind of like a chord macro. Which could be done in the future at some point, I guess.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't. I didn't mean to like
feature request.
Be like feature request. That's not. I was just asking if there was a reason why why FM synth we can do like basically have 4 paraphonic voices and not in like any other engine.
And the simple answer is the FM synth has 4 oscillators.
Okay.
The wave synth has 1 oscillator. The macro synth sometimes has a paraphonic mode where it has up to 4 or I think even 6 or 7 voices. Like for instance, the super saw is like basically 7 saws, I think, detuned.
Okay.
But yeah, those are just simple, macro synths. I don't know how else to describe it. I'm terrible at this.
You good.
So, what do we want to go over now? We're taking requests.
Yeah.
I could show how I go about some FM synthesis, or kind of dive into one of the other synth engines if we want.
Some deep dive stuff.
Some deep dive. I'll play some hold music while we wait. That's all I got. Okay, so I want to show off a little bit more of the super basic wave synth, because I was talking to somebody recently about some of the features with wave synth, and I would like to kind of go over them a little bit. So for those of you that don't know, the wave synth is basically a really simple wavetable synthesizer. It has, a couple shapes in it and the LFSR built in, and then it has a bunch of extra stuff afterwards that's just called overflow, which is literally reading random bits of memory. But primarily what you have here is a thing called size, which is how many steps horizontally the waveform has to be able to be drawn. And then we have three different modulators for that waveform. Multiply will basically repeat the waveform over and over again in the space allotted in the size. warp will kind of shift the entire how the waveform is drawn into that size region. It'll shift it over to one side, basically a bias. Mirror will flip the waveform horizontally, I believe, at a given point. And the filter actually by default writes to the table, which is slightly different than all the other synth engines in M8, which is why in filter, if you go up higher past the endpoint here of 4, it'll start saying LP post, HP post, BP post, and BS post. Post means post, which means it'll act like basically the other synths. It's kind of backwards, but it just means that the filter is now outside of the table that's in here. So I'm going to show some wacky things real quick. Basic saw wave. It has 256 steps in here. And you can see how that's actually drawn, how many steps you have. Like at 4, there's obviously 4 steps. So typical fashion here would be to do PWM using the mirror. Set an alpha to mirror. Or maybe a triangle. Oh, that won't do anything. So mirror doesn't do anything on triangle because triangle is in fact a mirrored shape. So you can see it's trying to modulate the mirroring, but it's not really doing anything.
Before, it's great.
What?
I never noticed that before. It's great.
So you can get some pretty wacky stuff in here, especially and stuff that doesn't really sound necessarily chiptune, but definitely digital and strange. Another thing we could do is set the envelope to amp. So I thought I'd show that a little bit because you could do some pretty weird stuff that's kind of outside the realm of you know, bleep bloop chiptune.
Very, very good.
What else should we show off here?
We haven't gone over actually using the render function, I don't think. Did we?
I did. Remember, I
you
bounced
did.
that chord into a single sample.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm just losing my mind. Okay.
But you know what I haven't tried for a while that I want to try would be kind of trying to do somewhat of a wavetable-y thing in the sampler.
Oh, yeah. I actually was just thinking about that. It's a good idea.
I wonder if I have... Isn't there wavetables? Done. And print. Hold on a second. Let me set this up. So this is a, you know, it's the, not everybody knows about this, but a mono wave is a sample that you could find in various places that somebody gracefully made that contains a bunch of little 256 step oscillator shapes. And right now I loaded it into M8 as a sample. I set my play mode to oscillator. And oscillator mode, you know, you have your basics here. Play the sample forward, play the sample backwards. Play the sample forward and loop it. Play the sample reverse and loop it. Forward ping pong. PP means ping pong, so it'll go forward and then backwards when it hits the end and keep going. Reverse ping pong, which starts backwards but then goes forwards and then backwards again. Then os mode and the os ping pong in reverse mode. Os mode does two things. One is it gets rid of any smoothing envelopes that are in the beginning and end of the waveform, I believe. Secondly, it never restarts the oscillator, or it never restarts the sample at the very beginning on new notes. So if you had, let's say, a really long sample that you wanted to use that had like an analog feel to it, you could put it in os mode, and if it was like a single sustained note of an oscillator, let's say, it'll never start, when you play new notes, it won't start it from the very beginning of the sample. And that kind of has more of an analog sound to it, and the fact that it's not the same thing over and over again every time you trigger a new note. So I'm using os mode for this, and I set the loop length to 0. I don't know. Hold on a second. Let me find a... Maybe if I just tune it so I could see the waveform. There we go. I'm going to try to modulate the loop start position using, I don't know if this is going to sound good. It might sound terrible. Let's try it. Yeah, it sounds pretty terrible, but awesome at the same time. Yeah, so I'm modulating the loop start using an LFO, so it's scrubbing the sample forwards and backwards. But let's do maybe a ramp up and maybe not so much amount.
While you're messing with the detune, did you mention anything about the tuning lock feature?
Oh yeah, so the
quote unquote.
Yeah,
feature?
the screen tends to draw a waveform. The on-screen oscilloscope or scope, if you want to call it, tries to draw at an interval where it matches the key of C. And sometimes it's a good indicator of whether or not you're in tune. If the oscillator kind of sticks there on the screen, then you know you're either going to be, I think technically you're either going to be in C or you're going to be playing a G. So, but it definitely helps to try to tune something using that. So now it's kind of not, scrolling backwards or forwards. I don't know if this is in tune to anything, mind you. Yeah, that's a C. Slightly out of tune, but it definitely helps to get there. Oh, right, because I'm almost dead center of the detune. Actually, yeah. Yeah, that works pretty well. But just a little, if you didn't know, now you know. I'm trying to tune it, but I think it's kind of modulating in and out of tune. That seems to be sticking there pretty good. Let me see if I could. Oop. Yeah, get the idea. And that doesn't need to work for just monowave. You could pretty much do that with any. You see, I'm scrolling through samples and they all sound the same. How about drums? How about drum loops? How about that one? I'm getting experimental now. Yeah, so I think sound design wise, you get pretty nuts. Whether or not that's useful or not is up to you. Yeah. So what do you think? Where should we go from here?
We could go into specific instruments presets if anyone has any questions about particular presets or how to like get some more minute detail kind of stuff. I don't know. So like someone had a question about my stinky 303 patch that I made that I've been thinking about fixing up. But
You need to redo it in FM.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, just additive synthesis modeling of an actual 303. Yeah, let's see if anyone has any questions regarding any in-depth synth engine stuff? Like any questions about wavesynth or macrosynth, sampler, FM?
And
MIDI?
FM has its own bag of, I don't know. You could just have a whole like meetup on the FM, I think. It's
Yeah,
kind of...
pretty much. I've barely scratched the surface.
So I should actually talk about FM just a little bit here, in that this weird algo thing doesn't really make much sense. At least I tried to make an interface that fit within the realms of M8, and I think I did a pretty good job with that, but it might be a little intimidating or confusing to look at. But basically, all you have to do is think of the FM synth as four oscillators, and their labels are A, B, C, and D. And the algorithm, or algo, basically allows you to choose how they're routed to each other. So in algo 0, D is the output, is the main output. And A modulates the pitch of B, which modulates the pitch of C, which then goes into D. And you could see the little M and C above the algo letters tell you that C is a carrier wave, was what it's called in FM. And C, B, and A are modulators, or M. So if I select a crazy looking algorithm here, like say that one, this means A gets added with B, gets added with C, and all three of those added together modulate the pitch of D. Here's another one. This one looks pretty confusing. A modulates the pitch of B, modulates the pitch of C. C goes into the output. And then that A and B combo is the same thing for D. So it's basically two oscillator outputs, C and D, that get added together for the main output, with A and B as the pitch modulators. So kind of keeping that in mind, you could see that the last algorithm here, algorithm B, is A plus B plus C plus D. So there's no pitch modulation. They're just all going to the output.
So question was, do the number of outputs determine the polyphony?
I mean...
So if you have only two carriers, that means you'd only be able to do a polyphony of 2.
I mean, if you're thinking about it in terms of polyphony...
Yeah.
I don't think of it in terms of polyphony. I think of it in terms of how many oscillators are actually being mixed to the output.
Yeah.
So if you were looking at it like a polysynth, then yes. But normally in FM synthesis, you could mix two waveforms together to create the actual final shape of a waveform.
Yeah, I'd say the polyphonic or chord kind of option is more of a feature than what, it's more of like an additive synth where you're combining different modulating oscillators into each other for a final result. And it just so happens that one of the algorithms allows you to make chords.
I do sometimes look at FM like, how many little synthesizers do I have to work with in terms of the final output?
That makes sense too.
And a lot of times I look at like algorithm 7 is one of my go-tos, I think. And it's because it has two oscillators that are going to the output with just a single input modulator.
It is running 8 channels of FM more demanding than 8 channels of other synth types. So it's kind of like having 32 voices. So if you were to use the chord FM algorithm on all 8 tracks,
it'll be fine.
Be fine?
Yeah, I try to make sure, I mean, that's part of doing code, is you make sure that whatever's possible is generally easily playable. The only exception in M8 is the SD card performance for streaming samples. Like, it'll start dropping out samples or parts of samples if you try to play, all 8 tracks stereo at a high, like 2 octaves above, the root. It's just the SD card can't handle that bandwidth. But every other synthesis type and all of the parameters, including using the filter and the limiting stage of the amplifier, that should all be playable. I mean, I could test it too. My go-to test when I was working on this was to do that kind of stuff. So limiter set to sine is more CPU intensive because it has to do some math for the sine wave. And the turning on the filter is going to add some CPU usage. So this is going to sound terrible, but let's just do it anyway. So I currently have all 8 tracks playing, all the oscillators with the filter on, you know, with the limiter set to sine, which is more intense. What you'll notice is it'll prefer to start dropping display frames. So normally the display updates, especially on the hardware unit, it updates at 60 frames per second. But it's kind of a low priority thing. So if synthesis really starts to eat away at the CPU, then the CPU won't have too much time to draw the screen. So you'll notice a little bit of screen lag. But generally you shouldn't really see that. You know, just like using any piece of hardware, you kind of want everything possible to be able to, you know, route inside the box actually work. I think that's a key piece of like any hardware, right? It's kind of like if you had a keyboard that had 32, you know, voice polyphony, but on a certain, you know, type of sound on a setting, it would choke out. That'd be super weird. So the same thing holds true with M8. I try to just make sure everything is still playable. And if it's not, then, you know, I have to do some optimization, which is fun. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, it looks like there had questions about managing to max out the CPU of the M8, and I mentioned that for the most part, it tends to only really choke if you're trying to file browse and play files or preview files while the song is playing with lots of samples.
Yeah,
that's where it tends to choke.
Yeah, the CPU too busy message is actually always triggered by the SD card taking too long to do something. And one of the ways I detect that the CPU is busy is if the display hasn't updated in a second, even though it's supposed to be 60 times a second, then obviously something's going wrong, so just go ahead and stop the song.
Yeah. I would say I think the main concern is whether that will happen during like a performance, and I would say it shouldn't, and you shouldn't be browsing files in the sampler while you're playing a live set.
Yeah, for some reason, scanning the directory index on an SD card while the SD is also buffering and reading samples off of the SD, you know, the SD card kind of sometimes trips on its own feet during that kind of process. But yeah, just don't browse samples while you're playing a song live. That would be my recommendation. M8 with an M2 drive upgrade? I don't think so. I actually think it's going to get better over time. I think SD card, at least I'm hopeful that SD card manufacturers will start really concentrating on application performance instead of the silly digital camera market, because I think there's a lot more revenue from base consumer market, you know, and using SD cards for applications and such. At least that's my guess. So I could be totally wrong. In which case we will switch to a M2 hard drive. No, I'm kidding.
I guess speaking of upgrades, regarding the micro mod, and in what way does that make the M8 upgradable? Is it just because you can swap out the board that you plug into it, or do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah. So on the next hardware reversion, or the reversion I'm working on that are going to be part of the base production unit M8, it has a connector on it for the CPU. So the CPU is actually on a little daughter board that's connected to the main PC, the main circuit board, and it's using a standard called micromod, which it's not really a standard. I think it's something that SparkFun, a store that sells electronic components for hobbyists, came up with, and it's a super cool little standard that they have. So I'm going to go ahead and use that for the production M8s. And that way in the future, if there is some magical chip that makes everything way cooler, then in theory you could just swap out that chip. So if you're familiar with an M2 hard drive, a M.2 hard drive, it's the same exact connector. So it'd be as simple as unscrewing 4 screws to open up the M8 and pulling out that card and plopping in a new one, in theory, and doing a upgrade, you know.
Yeah, I think that sounds pretty promising.
Yeah. It's better than baking everything on the board and then be dependent upon, you know, that lasting forever. But I think as it stands, I mean, I think M8's pretty darn powerful, and if there is CPU problems that somebody runs across, it could be a bug, and it's possibly I could fix it. I haven't, to be honest with you, I've done, you know, my best when I write the code, but I haven't had any reason to do any, like, you know, bare metal optimizations for code, because the processor in the thing is pretty awesome. The FM synth, you know, uses a sine wave approximation formula, so in that way it's pretty efficient. And that's why I can handle all 8 tracks playing, you know, 4 sine waves per track, but, you know, it could always be improved.
That probably segues regarding that stuff into probably the next thing that's on everybody's mind is regarding pre-orders. I know that was on your list of things to talk about today. Is that something you're ready to talk about?
I don't think so. I'm going to be making an announcement on my Patreon.
Okay.
But I mean, you know, no news is good news. I don't know. Pre-order, it's complicated because I want to open pre-orders up as soon as possible, but at the same time, I want a clear path moving forward, so I'm not taking people's money and promising something within a certain amount of time that I can't make. As well, I need to have a clear idea of all of my costs. So that involves me having designs somewhat final and enough quotes back from manufacturers and, you know, all of that kind of streamlined. And the one major hurdle, besides all the other little hurdles, has been dealing with the Teensy bootloader and waiting for, you know, those to come out. And the primary lag in that has been COVID-19. So be that as it may, the only time I'll be announcing any news on pre-orders will be through Patreon first, because they're helping support the project. So, and I know obviously some of you are on the Patreon that are currently listening, but, you know, out of respect for everybody who isn't there, isn't here right now listening, I'm not going to say anything until I post something there first.
Yeah, I think that's right. The right call in regards to that.
Yeah. Man, it's a lot of work. Also, this week has been tough for me because I'm stopping working for one of my primary jobs. And of course, I don't know if you've ever left a job before saying like, oh, this is my last week or whatever. It's like, it feels like, okay, well, this is our time to get as much out of you as humanly possible in this short amount of time, you know? So I have been super slammed this whole week. Yeah. But yeah, should we move on to something else music related?
Yeah. Were there any more topics that were supposed to be, or not supposed to be, but that we were going to cover?
Hmm.
We did song structure, deep dive, arrangement, resampling. I don't know if there was anything else.
We did, some FM stuff. I feel like I could just do a separate stream for that without everybody kind of standing by.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially
There was
because
also
that's a big topic, and I would really love for people to kind of lead that with questions rather than me trying to ramble and explain things, and I don't know what people actually need to know.
yeah, absolutely. We MIDI stuff would be really cool. I think that could be probably a topic in itself.
Yeah, and we also spent a little bit of time showing that off today.
Yeah, absolutely. We could probably go over probably deep dive with like specific instruments on how to like I don't know, just like
how to
fine
create
tune
drum
modulation. Yeah, yeah, drum synthesis would be a really good one. I know you did the snare, the C64 snare.
Yeah, the chip style drums. The C64 drums.
But actual drum synthesis stuff would be cool. That's something that I don't really know a whole lot about. That's why I have drum machines and drum samples, so I don't have to do that. But absolutely, drum synthesis would be a really good topic. And anyone that is more familiar with drum synthesis, I encourage you to go over that so we can really. I would love to learn some stuff from that.
I don't know if the M8's like super great at doing drums. I mean, it's totally possible. But I think like the best place to start with drums on M8 is the macro synth. It's got a kick drum model in there, and it's got a snare drum model in there, and it's got a cymbal for doing hi-hats and cymbals. And they all sound pretty darn great.
Yeah.
But the key thing with doing a good kick drum is you need that initial transient, that initial like click that really helps push, the hit.
Yeah.
Because I almost think of drum, like at least like bass drums and that kind of section of drum, like the two key components are like a somewhat sustained like low bass pitch, and then that initial like click transient that happens. And most of the stuff you would have to do a table to try to get that initial transient, and I don't know if that's quite fast enough, which is where something like that macro synth kick drum has built into it.
Right. It's built right into the algorithm.
I could show that if anybody wants to see it. I don't know how many people have checked that out yet. I'll just go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
Think of something else, guys. Let's see. Let me switch my screen on. There we go. So this will only take a minute. New. Gonna create a new instrument. Macro synth. Let's see. It's scrolling. There we go. Shape 21 is kick. So you can see that's the low bass tone I was talking about. And I think this is the transient. Yeah. So that kind of has the two elements I was talking about. You could do a little bit more shaping using like the sine wave distortion. Maybe too much. Maybe a little bit of a hold envelope. Oops. So that's our kick. And then for a snare. Snare. I saw it. There it is. 23. Let's go to a new phrase. It's like it sounds great by default. I'm gonna fill this in. And then for hats, we have the cymbal. There's also a struck drum. You know, I need to play with this more. I actually haven't played with the struck drum. But there's the cymbal. Kind of clipping the output, but get the idea.
I like your channel economy going on.
Another thing you could do is like send the cheap trick, sending the hi-hat to the delay. Where's it at? Send delay. So that way you don't need a hi-hat all the time. Whoa. And then we could make it 0 width. The ultimate trick for single channel songs, I guess.
It's pretty smart. Yeah.
More feedback. So right there's only one hi-hat. One note of hi-hat.
That's pretty clever. I actually had never considered doing that.
That just makes a mess. Oh well. I was trying to get experimental. So there you go. Bass drums. I wonder what the let's dive into the struck drum. Oh wait, I should keep that symbol, huh? Let me start anew. I don't know what struck drum is, so Oh, okay. It's like a metallic drum, I guess. Yeah. It's for getting all that steel drum awesomeness going on. Sounds pretty great, though. Yeah, so there we go. That would be a basic approach to that kind of stuff. I have 2 drums here that are FM based. FM bad snare 1, FM bad kick 1. They're probably terrible, which is why they're called bad. I don't know what they sound like. My bad snare. Why is my mate so quiet? Did I turn it down? Am I losing my mind? Oh, I see. The dry volume is super quiet on it. Yeah, it doesn't really sound like a snare. why it's called bad. What about the big kick drum? No, that's not bad. There's no real transient, though, like what we were talking about earlier. Yeah.
Could you make a, or you said a transient, right? I was going to say, maybe you could put like some reverb on it to bring out the tone, but I guess doesn't really work. I thought you put like white noise or something on it in the last meetup to like make it happen.
That would be the trick, would probably be to set the table tick rate to super fast. This operator is not doing anything, so I could, I'm trying to think of how I could do the noise. Let's see. Let's set this one up to do it. Feedback? Yeah. So I just assigned feedback of D to mod 3. So now this guy will control the feedback level. What were you saying? Nothing?
You could use amp as well. Just to have like an envelope or in tables and just, yeah.
That's not really doing what I want it to do, so let's move it to here. Get rid of that. So that's what I want that guy there, so I'm going to set that to level, so now I can turn it on and off. Yeah. FM3, turn up, and then immediately turn down. Is that right? Something like that? Oh. Hop to 2. Nope. That didn't work. Why doesn't that work? That works. Not consistent, really. Maybe it's too fast. Let's see. Hop 3. Oh, it's gonna. I can't do rep. Yeah, I can. I just have to move everything down again. There we go. Try that. Yeah, see, it just doesn't have the right sound to it. I'm sure somebody more clever than me can figure out how to maybe make a really nice FM kick. And I'm sure there's plenty out there. Yeah, I just don't think doing a table is quite fast enough. Maybe. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not the world's best bass drum by any means. You're right, though. I could probably do the same thing using amp. But then it might have the same problem if we're using the table to try to get that first initial transient. You know what I mean? Like, it has to be, like, super fast. I tried and I failed. Would be another way to do a drum. I think it pretty much covers it between the 3 different engines. I mean, obviously using a sample, but questions, thoughts, feedback? So we could do more instrument playing stuff, or we could play somebody's tracks. How are you guys feeling? play a 10K track? Should I play a 10K track?
I didn't have. I was talking to you and I had my mic off. Yeah, let's.
I was. No, you did. I was just ignoring you.
Oh,
we'll go with
okay.
that.
Yeah. I can go through the patch after we listen to some demos. Absolutely, we could do that as some supplemental stuff at the end.
What were you saying?
Some lamp asked. They wanted to go through one of my patches for
okay.
some stuff. But we could listen to a demo first, and then we could go through some supplemental patch stuff.
I say we listen to a 10K track.
Me too.
See if it actually plays back correctly. Which one should I play? There's one called Lunchbox and one called Closer.
Let's make Tom pick. Tom, which one do you want us to play?
I say it should be a committee vote. Let's play both at the same time.
I like Lunchbox. I like the name Lunchbox more, personally.
All right, we're gonna go with Lunchbox. Nobody gets a vote.
Step to me. 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 So you can take it. I'm the one. Step to me. Step to me. So you can take it. I'm the one. Step to me. 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 So you can take it. Step to me. 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 So you can take it. I'm the one. Step to me. 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 So you can take it. Step to me. I'm the one. 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 Step to me. So you can take it. Step to me. I'm the one. 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 Step to me. So you can take it. Step to
All right. That was excellent. I don't know how you did that, but I'll just assume that's all M8 synthesis, right? There's no samples being used.
That was entirely the entire thing, including the vocal samples, were all FM synth being modulated in tables. It's the power of tables, y'all.
Yeah. It's amazing how they got that vocal sample in synthesis. I'm not going to look behind the curtain now. I'll just assume it's synthesis. You guys want to you all want to hear the other track, or we want to play something else, or how are we feeling?
Yeah, I'm down to listen to the other one.
Just ignore that samples folder. So one thing I will note, 10K. I don't know if it perfectly played back correctly because I forgot. Like, I'm on an experimental build or an early build right now trying to fix a rep bug, actually. So hopefully these are playing back fine. I see lots of fees in here.
You know what I want. You know what I want. You know what I want. Come here. Now, closer. You know what I want. 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 Come here. Now, closer. You know what I want. 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 Come here. Now, closer. You know what I want. 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 Come here. Now, closer. You know what I want. 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 Come here. Now, closer. You know what I want. 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 Come here. Now, closer. You know what I want. You know what I want. You know what I want.
Amazing.
That was so good.
Yeah.
10K wants to come into the chat to talk us over this production stuff.
He's going to give a little Tom talk.
That would be great. Tom talk, please.
You said 1 second, sorry. So let's just dig through his structure here and break his song. If you guys like this song, it's going to be on my new album. Oh, he's here. Oh, sorry. Did I hear a Tom? 10K. Hey.
Hey, sorry, am I here?
You are here.
Oh, good. Sorry, I was just getting my headphones so I could talk and not just be yelling at Twitch.
You're breaking up a bit. Yeah, that doesn't work too well. How's your connection?
I guess one of the things that everyone's been talking about is tables, and I used a few of them, but most of my stuff's actually things really I think is really powerful in tables is using
Hey, 10K, you're breaking up pretty bad. I assume it's my internet and nobody else's. I'll just assume that. Oh, and he's gone. Well, since he's gone now, let me just tell you, if you liked that song, it'll be on my new album. Now that I have the source code. Quite excited about it.
I'm looking forward to hearing it on your album. Coming out 8-Bit Peoples.
It's actually, it's called Trash 10K. I wish, whoa, look at his tables. That's some crazy stuff. Oh, you can't see it.
But you're,
yeah. I'm not sharing. It's,
No, but I can imagine it.
It's behind the curtain. I put it behind a paywall.
It's the Patreon $50 a month tier.
Shut up and take my money. .gift.
Anyway, maybe we could arrange for a 10K next week, because I'd love to hear his tips and tricks and how his workflow is in tracks like this. It's probably vastly different than how I work. So. All right. Do we have any more tracks, or somebody wants to share something? I think you now have the floor.
I forgot mine at home.
Okay. Well, for anybody who doesn't know, if you have a little song, even if it's just something you're, sketching out on or sketching out and it's not completed, if you ever want to share it, you could share it on our weekly meetups. And if you don't want to stream it, you could send it my direction and I will stream it for you.
Yeah.
Also, we're always open to questions because I think questions really help shape how and what we talk about.
Yeah, it could be, and it could be anything regarding the UI, workflow, the instrument specifically, tables. If anyone has any other questions regarding that.
I'm just going to rename this song and save it. Tim's song.
That's the actual title of the track.
Yeah.
Tim's song.
There. Tim's songer. Perfect. No, I'm kidding. That was those two tracks were done by 10K. I don't know what 10K's Twitter handle is, etc. But if you want to tell people, let me know and I'll say it.
Celodux asks, is there a way to truncate the reverb using a command? As in, stop the reverb. Like hard stop, I'm assuming.
Oh, that'd be cool, huh?
Yeah, that would require like a master command on the master volume of the sends, right?
Yeah, I mean,
so you could do like a gated reverb kind of thing.
Oh, that'd be cool. I mean, let's see, what do we have? Reverb, room size, damping, mod depth, frequency. Yeah, we have no reverb level sequencing in here. It's something to
would be, yeah, that'd be cool because then you could do things like sidechain reverb, like a fake sidechain using the commands in a table.
Right.
It's really cool.
Or doing the gated reverb stuff too.
Absolutely, yeah.
So 10K said most of the stuff is for a project that he does with .ay called Booma. Booma. And how do people check out more? Do you guys have a site or handle somewhere?
He does. I'll find it for you.
I can't Google right now. I have too many windows.
I got it. I got you. It is 10K Freeman. I will post it in chat.
So I wanted to try here. Doing some kind of.
In fact,
yeah.
I'll do the whole URL. Make it easy for everyone.
I mean, the best we got is just changing the size. But that doesn't really do you much, does it? Because it doesn't have the same effect. Yeah. That is something to put on the to-do list, I think. I mean, technically you could do reverb on the hardware M8, because you could assign a I guess that'd be a workaround. That'd be a hilarious workaround. You could MIDI map the reverb and then do MIDI output back into MIDI input and then use a MIDI instrument.
Yeah, I think I asked about this like a while back and you told me to just do a MIDI loopback thing and it works.
I should just try it right now for science.
Let's do it.
This might end up in disaster.
Are you screen? I don't think you're screen sharing. I'd love to see.
Yeah, I forgot to do that. Again, I have way too many windows here. Let's see. Switch to that. Switch to that. There you guys go. Of course, you're not going to see anything because I have to grab a cable. The MIDI output into MIDI input. And I'm going to grab the hold B and touch the screen. So I assigned reverb to a screen axis. The x-axis right now is controlling the reverb volume. But I could go into the MIDI map screen. Boop. And you could see it here. And I could change the TX to a controller number. So let's say controller 1. So now reverb's assigned to an instrument. Let's make sure what would cause it to glitch. The only thing that to watch out for is a MIDI feedback loop, which would totally kind of break everything. But I think we're okay. So I'm going to assign CCA to CC number 1. So now I could, in theory, this will control the reverb right here. Not. Hold on. Oh, it has to be playing, huh? Hold on. Let me create another phrase. Oh, it's going to MIDI out channel 1. So I'm going to turn off. I see. So MIDI map, no. MIDI settings. Let's turn all these off. So I'm turning off basically all of my MIDI channels here just for sanity. You don't have to do this. And then the control map channel, I'm going to set to 1. So now I think it should work. That's hilarious. It's such a hacky workaround. Let's see. So so I guess if you wanted to do it, there's one method. I could actually clone this. So I have instrument 1 being with it off, and I'll do an instrument 2 with it being on. Actually, that would do the same thing. Oh wait, I need to do, I'm gonna do a groove. Groove 1. I want this pattern to run really fast, so. Yeah, I definitely need to add that as a as a command instead of doing the MIDI workaround, because I think that, yeah, like as we were discussing, I think that can be really fun to actually use as an effect command versus this MIDI hack workaround. It's hilarious. Oh, that's something I want to do. I'm going to change that to an FM synth. So something else I was thinking about with FM synth, which is kind of cool in this additive mode or 4 independent oscillator modes, is I could have, let me turn all these other ones down. So we just only have one oscillator. Probably. So I could have like, you know, like a sub oscillator thing going on here. just by using multiple. Let's see, this should be 5. Why am I doing this the long way? There. And then this one an octave up. We detune slightly. Turn that up. Yeah. I'm using it kind of like a bunch of stuff at the same time. It's like a 3 oscillator synth at that point. Actually, I could do another one and have it slightly detuned from the root. And that's too much. It's pretty good. Oh, did that wrong, didn't I? Oh, why isn't this working anymore? Oh. I need to assign reverb to it. Pretty neat. All right, that was a fun experiment. Thanks for being a part of my TED Talk. Mikey, you want to show that instrument thing?
Yes, I would be more than happy to. Give me just a second.
As you're yelling from across the room.
Yeah, I had my headset off. I'm so sorry. Let me get that going.
It was that annoying, wasn't it?
I was getting another beer. You're driving me to alcoholism. All right. Let me get this set up here. So I had a few people ask me about instrument patch. I actually want to do an updated version. I think the one that I shared with everyone was the sorry. Give me a second here. Was the wavsynth version. Give me a second.
Wavesynth acid patch?
Yeah, I had a wavesynth acid patch. That's right.
Hey, I made one of those. It's probably not as good as yours though.
No, it's not that good. It's just good ways to get I guess this would be a good like deep divey synth type deal. Ways. There you go. All right, so I did share a patch for
your screen's not moving.
Let me refresh that here. There we go. Okay, so I'll make a new instrument here. I have a new song, and I'll just load up my patch here. It's called the M8303, and the idea is that so if you're not familiar with the TB303, it's a monophonic synthesizer traditionally used for bass lines. And if you're familiar with rave music in general, it's kind of culturally historic and important synthesizer. If you listen to any acid or acid house, you've probably heard one. It sounds like someone stepping on a mouse, basically, just squeaks and squelches. So I like making acid music, as you can tell from my name. And I wanted to have. I made this patch mostly as a placeholder for my actual 303 whenever I implement it into a song. Obviously, I can't carry a mono synth with me everywhere I go like I can the M8. So I wanted something that was similar or as accurate as I could using my own baby brain knowledge. And I came up with a synth using, I think this one is the macro synth, using the saw square. So the saw square is a morphing oscillator that obviously morphs between a saw and a square. So uh, the TB303 has two waveforms, the sawtooth and square. So my cat is meowing.
Heard that.
I tried to find what I could say is the most efficient way to get somewhere in between the two of a sawtooth and square. Since the square wave on a 303 is actually shapes its wave shape actually depends on the pitch of the note or the pitch of the VCO. So at like around a D to D sharp, it's a full 50% square wave, and then it modulates based on the pitch. So with the square and the saw square synth, you're able to adjust that in fine increments using the, I believe it's the timbre. So if I play something here, if I get rid of this, you can see that is mostly a square, but I can change the wave shape using the tambourine color. Looks like color here. As you can see here, it kind of has that square wave edge on the end of the sawtooth there. So I'll just load up the patch again just for ease. And again, if I take off the filter there, you can see it's basically a sawtooth with kind of a square edge. And to get the flavor you want, you just adjust these two. One of the important things to me in regards to if you're trying to do some 303 accurate, and I say accurate in quotations, kind of acid lines, is the use of the 303's accent and slides. So I find that a very accurate slide is going to be the pitch slide somewhere around 7 ticks. And you want to get rid of the instrument so it legatos instead of retriggers. And then if you want an accent note, which to me is like what really makes a 303 sound really good, is it has this, its accent, it pings the VCA and the resonance and the VCF all at the same time. So it makes this kind of transient wow sound. It just pushes this envelope through all those factors and gives it a really unique, cool sound. And the way I found to kind of emulate that is to use a table, for example. So I think I have a different example in a different song file. And actually this one, I'm actually going to update the instrument to include the wave file that you'll have to point to. I actually have some raw waveforms of the 303's sawtooth and square if you want to be super accurate that I will share in the near future. And this is my original version using a sample of the raw waveform that I found on YouTube. So it's slightly transcoded, but if you look here, this table, I've created an accent note that triggers when I hit the table. So you see here, I have a table hop command on the phrase. So I'll just play the acid line real quick. And you can see that.
Great.
Yeah. And so it's the table hop that creates the accent. If you look at here, all I'm doing is I'm creating a quick, just a real sharp modulation of the decay, the resonance, and a little bit of amplification here. And that just causes to distort, causes the resonance to peak, and it increases the amount of the decay. Actually, sorry, it shortens the decay of the low pass filter.
And
so
you don't have the limiter in post.
Nope.
Huh. Oh, because you're using it to shape it.
Yeah. So you can see here, when the table triggers, it cuts the decay real short, because that's how the accent works on the actual 303. Is it's a real sharp decay and a spike on the resonance. And you can see here the resonance with that little tick that shows up. It's causing it to spike. And then I add a little bit of the amp here just to give it a little more bite. And then obviously you could move into like the post distortion to get that real crunchy 303. Like if you were trying to make a bass line from, a vampire rave in Blade, you'd have some of this distortion. And it's not like super accurate.
For those that don't know, the lim in post mode means that the filter is also being crushed.
Yeah, is post filter distortion.
Yeah.
I have some alternate versions here. I'll share them all again. I have the saw square version, which I haven't set up the table for. So I'm going to make both the macrosynth version as well as the sample-based version, just for different flavors. And I'll set up the table. So all you have to do is have the table hop point to the accent whenever you want it. But
I like the idea of using the table hop as the accent trigger.
Yeah. I've been table hop, I think, is extremely underrated. Just being able to point to things real quickly without having to use all the FX and leave this open for other things like chance. So you could have you could put the table hop here, for example, right? And then you could have the chance value set something like this, right? You have it set to F and then F8. So it's half the time that accent comes in and spikes it. And then, you still have room to do like a pitch slide or some other modulation stuff. So anything that's synth modulating that you just want to do for an instantaneous, you can just set up table hops and then just remember which table hop does what. And obviously, like here, normally when it's not spiking, you can see here that it's not spiking it until it hits that table hop command. Yeah, very handy. So use that THO command. It is a beautiful, wonderful feature that I wish that LSDJ always had. But here it can be applied to anything. You could have it so you could have it so it's it pings like the reverb or the delay or something like that, as well as the filter on the instrument. So tables are good. Turns out they're really good. So I'll be working on an updated version of both the macrosynth and the waveform version. And I'll be showing those in the near future.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's that patch.
Well, what's harder, sequencing on a real 303 or setting all this crazy math up?
You know what? They both have their ups and downs. I will say that. I'll say that at least with the Real 303, I'm just kind of button mashing on an actual 03 more than I am with it with the M8. So it just depends on
Yeah, that sequencer on the 303 drives me crazy.
It's nuts. It's just you just kind of have to. A lot of it's kind of guesswork, and it's not fun, but it's really prone to making errors, and
I think
the errors are more like happy accidents because you end up with like really cool weird things that you didn't. You're like, oh, I thought I put it in this like sequence, and it turns out I fucked up on like 1 or 2 steps.
It's kind of like playing a different instrument, I guess.
Absolutely.
You end up hitting those happy accidents that you would never do normally.
Absolutely. And the closest, I mean, you could always just add a little bit of randomness to the M8 to try and get close to that. But yeah, it's in itself its own instrument, and it makes itself, it's fun.
I have a feeling that
it can be frustrating.
I have a feeling that people that like see a tracker and they're filled with disdain and hate probably never tried sequencing a 303.
Yeah, absolutely. The level of precision that a tracker has is just surgical. You can just get into such fine, minute detail. Just increase the, change the groove, increase the resolution of each step, and suddenly you're able to modulate so many things on each beat that it gets stupid. I mean, if you ever look at something like someone like Hitori Tori, if you ever look at his stuff on YouTube, he's playing BPMs of like 400, 500, 600 BPM just to have that step resolution on Reason. Yeah, it's nuts. So I mean, I've never been big on hardware sequencers. Electron's probably I'm kind of new to Electron, but they clearly have some sort of tracker influence in the way that their workflow is, and I was able to quickly connect with like Electron workflow over other step sequencers.
Yeah, the whole revolution with Electron, if I remember correctly, was the whole parameter locking thing. Holding down a trig to turn a parameter was like, oh, well, that makes everything way the hell easier. Versus before, the closest you got was to like hit the record play button and then turn the knob a bunch.
Yeah, try to do live automation recording. I mean, it's funny because all of Roland's new hardware does that, and they don't really. I think you can do some sort of parameter locking, but it's a nightmare.
Does the Electribe actually, the ER1 do parameter locking? I thought it was just the record mode.
I think it does. Yeah, I think it does.
I swore it was just the record mode. I don't remember. No, the record mode as in you turn a knob and hit record, and you record the automation that way. I don't remember it actually having maybe the iPad app has parameter locking style. I don't remember.
It's been a while since I messed with an Electribe.
Yeah. I owned an ER1 back in like 1999, so I don't remember too much of how it worked.
Yeah, but yeah, it's funny because I'm working the other way where I'm slowly getting a bunch of Electron products, and it's been easier for me to understand that than trying to do like the TR-8S, surprisingly. Just being able to really finely tune each step, and it's interesting because I'm on a couple other Discords where people are watching the M8, and they are a lot of Electron people, Electronauts, I think they call themselves. And I try to tell them that like, yeah, tracker is just like vertical parameter locking, and they're like, oh, okay. So it makes much more sense once they understand that they just need to turn their heads 90 degrees.
And it's kind of like parameter locking. And when you go to the instrument screen and highlight a parameter, and then you go back to the phrase, and then you it doesn't insert the value that it was at, but it inserts the command for that parameter that you had highlighted. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really nice.
It's nice and frustrating at the same time because sometimes you want to keep the old parameter.
Yeah.
But
I just do this. I
yeah.
just make sure I tap it and then go over.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it helps more than it harms, personally. So. Well.
Yeah, it's definitely a love-hate feature. I love it when it's what I want to do, and I don't like it when it's not what I actually wanted to do.
Yeah.
Like
for sure.
if I want to glance at the instrument real quick to what was that parameter? You know, and go back.
Yeah.
Oh, I lost it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, were there any other questions regarding instrument stuff? I mean, I guess there's always just you could always dive deeper into instruments, how to make cool. If anyone wants to, like, maybe they have a patch they'd like to share, that would be cool too, just to see how people get some really cool bassy or weird.
I don't have my mate, but I made your patch like distorted. Like it sounds like it's overdrive. Like it sounds like it's running through the Foley box. If you change the shape on the M8 or 303 to ones to plucked, and then turn the amp up to FF, that's all it is.
Okay. We can so let me load one up here. Just turn it to plucked, you said, and then the amp to FF.
Yeah, buddy.
Let's see here. Like
now mess with the cutoff. Yours is wilder than mine somehow. I think I had mine on Foley.
It's like trying to control chaos.
Now change your shape to 1/8.
1/8?
So I got this to sound like a 15% duty cycle on 18. Anyways, that's all I got.
Yeah.
You know, that's interesting with the accent trick that you were doing. You could just totally switch the shape or waveform to whatever, you know, and it kind of carries those same characteristics to totally different oscillator shapes.
Does LFO allow you to go to shape?
No, that'd be weird.
I mean, I guess I could just do that in a table too, right?
Yeah.
Just have
a table is an LFO.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely.
I was just thinking about that. I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, you just do like a repeat one, right?
No, because it's an absolute.
Ah, that's right.
Yeah.
I guess you could just.
I mean, you could just do rand.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, absolutely. Just do like a random command. And then what? Hop here.
You gotta hop to row 1. Right. Yeah. That's just gonna make a mess. You're gonna want the random to be set to like 2 something, 2A or something, because I think there's only, there's only 42.
Oh, it doesn't change the shape here. It doesn't show you.
Yeah, it won't show you. But I bet if you open up that filter, it probably will sound like a garbly mess.
He was right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Getting experimental.
what is sound design? It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think if I was making a game, like a game soundtrack, I would love the crap out of M8. Is all I think of when I'm like making sounds and stuff. I'm like, oh, this would be perfect for that kind of crap.
It's really interesting you mentioned that, because I have several people who I've showed it to, and they're just like, oh, you know, I make soundtracks as like my full-time job, and this would be an amazing sound design tool for both soundtracks and for sound effects.
And the palette of a lot of the synths is pretty darn unique in its own right, you know?
Absolutely.
This is coming from somebody that uses a lot of VSTs. So, I mean, you could do this in VST. I'm not saying you can't, but it's just unique in its own little limited way.
Yeah, it's nice because you're able to really fine-tune any sort of automation on just a very micro step level. I feel like, I mean, you could do that with like Ableton Live, but it feels more loose, since you're with Ableton, you're usually with automations, you're just kind of drawing using kind of their line and dot kind of thing. I don't know. But it feels more frustrating like using a mouse than being able to go in and just like, you know, you can change things with just little tiny parameters here and there.
I think my main problem with Ableton is, or I guess any computer software, is I have too many options, and it's hard to kind of focus in on something. Versus when I use a piece of hardware, I end up just, you know, especially an interesting piece of hardware, I end up spending a lot of time on it and come up with something interesting, you know, and then bring that into the DAW and work it in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I you know, a lot of us come from, you know, workflows like LSTJ where you have those limitations and you have to work with the best of them. So it's nice to have a bigger palette, but still have some limitations. So you have to think around, like, what are the solutions to these things that I want to happen? And I don't know, in many ways, it ends up being efficient or more interesting than having something super powerful like a DAW where you can draw these shapes, and you kind of find yourself doing less making music and more just getting lost in software, I guess. Yeah.
You know, it probably speaks some to my inability to focus when I'm using software. You know, I mean, I know there's tons of people that are crazy productive on Ableton, etc., DAW.
Absolutely, and it's also like with in regards to VSTs, you know, every VST you know, is made by a different developer, and they have different UI, different workflow. So suddenly you're trying to learn one VST and a different VST, and you know, there's a certain level of rigidity and consistency between each of the synth engines on the M8 that makes it really easy for each one to translate from one to the next, where you're not, you know, it doesn't feel like you have 10 different devices in front of you and you have to learn how they all behave and interact with each other. Instead, it's all one unified system that all flows and speaks the same language. And that makes it really easy to pick up and kind of quickly learn and master these things.
Yeah, I mean, it helps that the macro synth only has 2 parameters per shape.
That does help. It is definitely what's the phrase I'm trying to think of? Not form over function, but kind of just functionality over features. You know, you don't have every possible parameter unlocked to the point where you're just sitting and playing with parameters instead of making music, I guess.
It's Mac versus PC. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I know that, you know, especially now, I think more than ever, we're in this age of where with Eurorack becoming super popular, and there's so many synth companies that are now taking more chances, and they have bigger budgets to make really crazy synthesizers where you can basically go in and alter the architecture of what's going on. People have this expectancy to be able to go in and do those kind of things, and you go, I don't know, it's so easy to get lost in just crafting as opposed to composition. And there's a nice balance with the M8, I think. Between the two.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a I don't know. Yeah, keeping things simple is important when you want to just play around and not get too bound up by all of the options you have in front of you.
Yeah.
And M8 kind of has that balance. It's kind of weird. Like, there's some things that I wish M8 did or presented that were a little bit more clear. But it's funny because, software-wise, it's maybe a year and a half old now. But, like, when you first create a new instrument and you go into and you select a type, the very first type is like the world's most simplest pulse wave, and it's like, why is it ordered like that? Why is not macro synth first? And it's like, it's because technically when I made M8, the wavesynth I made first, and then later on I ported macro synth, and then later on I added sample playback, and then later on I added FM. So it's like the order of that stuff is like the order it was added in. I
mean, it is order added, but it also is, I guess, in a way, order of complexity. Although not saying that the wavesynth can't be complex.
Yeah.
But it's much more like, you want to make something.
I guess it kind of is ordered by complexity. I never even thought about that.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
That's not intentional. That's just the order of how things were made on the thing.
Yeah, it's cool though. So someone who wanted to learn synthesis, or understand subtractive synthesis, who maybe not have any idea before, wavesynth is the way to start, because you have these raw waveforms, and you're like, okay, well, how can I, how can I turn this into a kick drum? And you learn that you have to automate the pitch. And how do I automate the pitch? Well, you have envelopes, and you assign the envelope to the pitch, and then you're able to adjust the parameters. And these parameters, I mean, you can translate these parameters to any synthesizer, and suddenly you learn that, I make a kick drum by modulating the pitch with an envelope and giving it, changing the decay shows how long that kick's gonna linger. And you can start with something real simple, and then you move on to macro synth, which is different. It's those synthesis engines, in piece by piece, and especially with complex things like the kick drum engine, or any of the physical modeling stuff, and it just gets more and more complex. You got and then you have your samples, and you can apply the same techniques that you learn from wavesynth onto the samples, and then FM is its own can of worms. And
I think that it's funny that I think that the sample, like in my mind, the sample synth is more complicated than the macro synth. I guess it's just got all these weird parameters that don't really, like, if you don't know much about samples and stuff like that, like, it doesn't like make any sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah. Sample.
Yeah, and a lot of the parameters like don't do anything unless they're in certain, like slice
Absolutely.
will break everything.
Yeah, yeah. It makes you get real cool granular stuff, and that's and yeah, it has its own level of complexity. Right. And the same goes for the FM, where there's just like, there are people that are going to only use the sample engine. There are people asking me. They're just like, I want a pocket sampler. And I mean,
it's a little worrisome to me, because I never thought of the sample engine as nice as the other synthesis stuff.
I feel like it's definitely become far more robust than it was when we had version 9.98. It's definitely fleshed out, and it's because of that demand. And I think at this point, the sample engine is very competent.
As long as you have a decent SD card, anyway.
Yes, of course. The SD card will make a difference. Yeah, it's really interesting because there are people who are there. Ben's talked about this too, where there's going to be a point where people are going to ask, should I get the M8 tracker or the Poly-N tracker? It's going to be a real discussion at some point. And
well, the M8's really basic and tiny,
yeah.
and the Poly-N's really big and complex and complete.
Yeah. So it's going to come down to what you want to use it for. If you're looking to do a lot of heavy sample manipulation, the Poly-N tracker has more robust features for that. But
I mean, I don't know. I don't own one, so.
I would love for you to try one out and see how you feel about it. The workflow is interesting.
But what about Poly-N tracker versus Deluge or Octatrack?
Yeah.
They're all totally different things, and they work kind of differently. So there's no difference. I think comparing M8 to the Poly-N tracker is like comparing, the Digitac to, some other thing. They're just totally different.
It's workflow and platform. I'm sure there are people who wish that look at the M8. They're like, well, I have trackers, and why can't I see every track playing at the same time? Right? I can't see every note.
Oh, right.
Coming from FamiTrack or something, and the Poly-N tracker does that. And there's some people who want to see all that information processing.
Well, yeah, that's the primary difference is the workflow difference between a normal tracker and a LSCJ style tracker. They're kind of different, very different. But also, I think they're also cumbersome a bit too, comparatively.
Yeah.
Like how fast you could get with the D-pad and the couple buttons, comparatively to the kind of work that you have to do on a typical
traditional
tracker.
Keyboard workflow. Yeah,
especially without a mouse and just remembering all the shortcuts. You need the full keyboard, and you need all that stuff, which is fine. Like, I love renoise, don't get me wrong, but for what M8 is, it's very efficient.
That's why the Poly-N tracker has so many buttons. Every button has a function, because it's basically just taking the computer keyboard and turning all those hotkeys into dedicated buttons that you can press. And it's still a lot. I mean, you have to learn and you have to assign those kind of button presses to muscle memory to some degree, and it's so much more than the 8 buttons that the M8 has. And I don't know, it feels more natural. But
doesn't the Poly-N, you have to do kind of like sub menu diving to do like copy pasting and all that stuff?
That's the thing, is it has that whole huge dedicated interface, and you still have to learn shortcuts and those kind of commands. Yes. So, and that's what makes it kind of difficult.
Yeah.
And
I think the big breaking deal point isn't like samples per se. It's what tracker workflow you work with better. Do you work better with the all tracks in one pattern, or would you rather have separate independent tracks?
10K mentions other things like a built-in parametric. I don't know if it's a parametric or just a standard equalizer. The M8 doesn't have an equalizer, but using the filter, especially with like bandstop, you can actually do bandstop and bandpass. You can actually do some decent equalizing on your instruments. Obviously, you don't have a master EQ, but you should be playing with bandstop and bandpass.
Does the Poly-N have a EQ per track?
It does. It has.
Is it per instrument, or is it per track?
No, I think they added a 5-band master EQ. I don't know if it's per instrument. I haven't checked it in a while, but they recently added a master EQ. Yeah.
Oh, it's just one master EQ.
Yeah, just a 5-band, I think.
Okay, so it's not per track or per instrument.
No.
Okay.
No. And again, that's I find myself also getting lost in EQ stuff. It's so easy to spoil a track by messing with an EQ for too long. suddenly you lose you can make a tracks that just lose all of its pop by just playing with the EQ too long.
There's some things I like doing generally and working in a DAW, like, you know, rolling off my low end, making sure there's no sideband on the low end, you know, doing that kind of utility task type stuff that you can't do. But you can't really do that in any hardware that I know of, so it's kind of a moot point. That's more of like a mastering type thing, I think.
Yeah. At that point, you're exporting stems and you're either sending it to someone or you're going into, you're going to Ableton or whatever DAW and just cleaning it up yourself. Yeah. But honestly,
I mean, at some point, I can add a EQ per track. Like, I know I have the bandwidth for that, doing some basic testing, but it's a matter of UI and all of that stuff that goes into it. And then, like, do you want it really per track or should it be per instrument? And if it is an instrument, where do you put it in an instrument so it's kind of tucked away in there when you need it, you know? Yeah. It kind of turns into a can of worms, so I'm not worried about it for now. For now, we have more than enough to work with.
I mean, it's not that difficult to get nice clean mixes in the M8. You just need to play with the filters, play with the volume control, mess with the limiter, and you can get some pretty decent mixes. I mean, all the stuff I've put out so far with the M8 have all just been straight renders. I haven't gone into doing any post-production stuff.
That's another thing M8 doesn't have is transient based sample slicing, which would be nice at some point in the future. That and loop markers would be excellent. But, you know, it never ends. It never ends. So, but our stream does at some point. Hey, Mikey, did your mic stop working or did you just quit? Oh, your mic battery died. Rest in peace, mic battery.
Hello, it's me, Michael Battery. My H6 died. The AA. Oh no, it just fell asleep because I wasn't apparently doing it enough to let it know. But I just plugged straight into my interface.
Anyway, yeah. Point being, features never end, so I'm not worried about adding anything at this moment.
Yeah, I think your focus on the hardware and the documentation is much higher priority. I think at this point the M8 software is super robust. We've got so many different synth engines. I don't know. At this point, everything else is just gravy.
Yeah, there's like 2 or 3 minor bugs pending another update, which will probably go out in the next week or two. My priority, though, is getting the hardware situated for pre-orders. So after the hardware stuff kind of goes out and pre-orders are open, then I could spend more time on the documentation. But it's kind of like I need to just focus on one piece at a time and move forward. And yeah, you're right. I think the software's had enough updates. In the last month and a half, we added sampling, rendering, stereo samples, FM synthesis. Yeah.
All sorts of stuff. I mean, if you just go back and just take your headless even and just roll back to an old iteration and watch how your songs suddenly just kind of crumble. Not like crumble, but there are a lot of quality of life. I mean, yeah, just quality of life stuff and engine stuff that just completely different. It's been huge and
a lot of user feedback definitely helped shape those things for sure.
I mean, and it's crazy because again, like 10K saying, like, even the sample engine has gone really far just from a lot of user feedback. But even before then, it worked perfectly fine, and now it feels like something you could really craft some really complex design and music using samples alone if you wanted to. It's crazy. Yeah, and that definitely comes to a lot of just beta testing and people trying to break the hardware and software as best they can, I guess. Yeah, good.
Yeah, good job, everybody. You're breaking my back.
Yeah. break the software, break Tim.
Yeah, I've been broken for at least 3 months. It's actually a good distraction from the garbage fire that we've been dealing with for at least the last year.
Absolutely. I think to have it have the M8 as kind of a constant has been really helpful, at least for 2020. I know that just like over the summer it was just nuts with all the protests and the virus and people just losing their minds, and it was just second wave kicking in. People just really wanted something else to focus on. It's been like at least for me, it's been just a significant, I guess, distraction, or at least something else I could focus on and not be consumed by scrolling through Twitter and feeling like death is approaching.
Yeah. So I think we could wrap the meetup.
Yeah.
Unless anybody has any specific questions. I mean, nobody's been asking anything that I know of, so I've been ignoring everybody. But I think next week we should probably start playing around with external instruments and MIDI. It's something we've gone on a little bit about, but not really at all. As well as another one was live performance options and ideas.
Yeah.
There was some stuff about Touch Designer display application, but I don't think we really need to go into that, especially that there's going to be so many other options besides Touch Designer now.
Live performance options. Yeah.
I mean, that kind of stuff we could go over next week.
We absolutely. I mean, if we really want to, we could set up a literal live performance of an M8 thing and see how that goes. You could literally just watch the screen as you see the cursor move around and trigger things. I mean, that's a real thing that we could go through, and you can see how behavior of like using it in a performance setting could work. I mean, I think that's a viable thing.
I mean, I have some stuff that's I don't have any. The thing is, I don't have any M8 songs, really, except for the 2 demos. But I also have set up a couple of my live performance songs as stem-based playback for live performance, which is probably an interesting topic to go on to. Like if you wanted to use M8 as just a stem playback kind of manipulation thing for live use. But yeah, there's a lot of things we could discuss on that. As well, again, if anybody has any songs you would like to share, you could send me a bundle and I'll play it back in full stereo, or you could join us next week and play it yourself and we could discuss it. I heard that this person called 10K will also be joining us next week with decent internet.
Yeah.
I heard they are moving to the United States this week so that they have good internet. I could just be making that up, though.
They're getting a job with Comcast.
No, I'm only kidding, 10K. But I would love for you to come on and break down some of those tracks that we played. They're pretty great.
Yeah, we've got a commitment right here. We also had an earlier commitment. I don't know if you missed. Gloom said that they're going to send you their polyend tracker so you can test it out.
I would rather not. I actually probably will get a polyend at some point, but I want to get it as an artist, not as a developer working on a product.
Absolutely.
You know,
I think
because I personally love having tools, and I have a lot of different hardware sequencers and trackers, and I don't know. So I'm just waiting for my development to slow down so I could approach maybe the polyend as a user and not so much as like, hey, how did they do that? You know, I don't want to play catch up or copycat or any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Marketing analysis, I think is what it's called.
I don't want to do that. I know that. I mean, it looks fantastic. That piece of hardware just looks phenomenal. So.
Yeah.
Who knows? All right, cool. So thank you, everybody, for joining, and hopefully we'll see you next week on our next meetup.
Yeah. Have a wonderful evening.
Yeah. Have a great evening, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.